Okay, abusuya be makwa aba sonko so edeba POG Media so. Abusuya yembonra eye yensemu. Abusuya secretly Ken Ofori Atta aba be piemu ewo Ghana ha abusuya enye asam ketu akra na wakwa ko piemu ewo court na court wo den nsi. Emre bi me de brem say interesting moment ahead. Abusuya Ken Ofori Atta akwa seal militaries anase BNI for omubora ni fie ekwa invade wo mumientie ensema ekoto say former finance minister Ken Ofori Atta has filed a lawsuit against national security operatives accusing them of trespassing on his property and is seeking damage. Abusuya Ken Ofori Atta NHS while seal national security operatives abusuya say omo ebowura ne fie wa o che say nyembra senke so omo bowura ne fie na omo bowura ne fie okran so ne nyoma bia che say omo asese no ene nyoma bia che say ne secret we bia omo de aba abonten no abusuya Ken Ofori Atta etumi abawura mu ewo court akwa seal sa national security for na ye be bisa say Ken Ofori Atta na ye declare wanted na wabaga na dia ono momanya akokudro abawura court akwa akoye den akusi amanfo yensa momre na busu amom yenko na yenkonko ti ensema e course na answer na ebeko no se wo nsem kan bi afahye the comment section like share ma afofro so answer into me enka bi aha POG Media so medamase.
In fact, they do not even describe them as police officers, except that when you look at the names of the people in there and then how they are, their names, you can deduce that they are talking about police officers. But the writ of summons, together with the statement of claim, they do not describe them as national security operatives. They do not describe them as police officers, but they just describe their conduct as unlawful, and they describe how they came into the house, what they did, and to that extent, they think it is an unlawful conduct for which the court must intervene to grant the relief sought.
And this suit by Ken Ofori Atta cites 2 senior police officers.
So the 2 are the defendants. Right. However, when you read in the statement of claim, you would find that they said the 2 were together with some 12 other persons. Okay. Those 12 persons have, however, not been indicated on the face of the writ of summons. Amongst the 12, 9 of them, according to the statement of claim, were soldiers.
Okay.
So that's why I was making the case that this fits the reports of a raid
of what we
are seeing on the screen.
Oh, okay.
One would have expected that maybe specific names would have been mentioned, on the back of what we do know. But you do not see that mentioned there except the 2 persons who appear to be the defendants.
So the only time these persons we are seeing on the screen are allegedly, as it were, referred to or captured in the suit is the 12 other persons that the suit talks about.
Yes.
Who were soldiers.
Yes. Not all 12. 9 of the 12 are soldiers. So it means that, 2 plus 9, that's 11. There's a last person who is supposed to be in the picture.
Well,
however,
that person
the
was
suit
not
is against the 2 persons.
The 2 persons.
Yes.
These the 2 senior police officers.
Exactly.
Okay, whom we don't see in the video, by the way.
Well, you see people in the video, but you are unable to tell whether there's a police officer in there or not. What we see now,
there's a fundamental question that comes to mind as to the other question he raises in the suit is that they didn't have the warrant to do so.
Yes, because they purported to have come to conduct a search, and he says that purported search was without a warrant.
And the warrant, if so possessed, should have been shown.
Exactly.
Okay, but what I want to find out right now is whether it is regular practice for the National Intelligence Bureau or National Security, for that matter.
That's if they were.
If they were.
Yeah.
Because the statement, and it's good that we clarify and put this in perspective, that this suit does not describe these 2 as national security operatives.
No.
but then it only relates to them as being part of a group of people who raided his house.
Exactly.
Okay. Richard Commodore is a security analyst, a former operative of the National Intelligence Bureau, now, well, formerly BNI. But Dennis, stay with me, because I'm going to come back to you. Mr. Commodore, appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a matter of law, and there's another issue of security to this conversation. So I'm going to dwell on the security part of it with you because of your experience in how this institution works. Can an exercise of a sort be conducted without a warrant? I mean, is it a practice to be done of anything of a sort?
Okay, so as a standard procedure, law enforcement officers in general, or the BNI, with an investigative mandate, can arrest you with or without warrant. And they can also search and seize whatever items they are looking for with or without warrant. When they activate searching without warrant, it means that it becomes a state of emergency. Or if they want to arrest you without warrant, then they will explain the conditions under which they are arresting you without a warrant. But I want to believe that filing the suit against them, if the officers who entered his house were acting in their personal capacity, then the particular officers could have been sued. But if they acted in the name of the state, then the state should be the one rather who is being sued and not the particular officers. Unless it has been established that the officers acted on their own and they were not acting on the authority of the state. Because officers, as law enforcement officers, when they act on behalf of the state, they do not bear the liabilities. It is the state. So that is where we are. And I'm happy that you were raising several questions with the suit in a manner and a form it has been serving to the general public. But I can tell you, as a standard procedure, all law enforcement officers, from the FBI to the CIA to the MI5, MI6, the BNI, the research department, the police, and even the military intelligence, you can be arrested and you can be searched with or without warrant. And whichever option they adopt, they will explain it to you why they are adopting that option. So that is where we are after.
I see, and I asked this general question, not in direct reference and specificity to this particular case. I asked it in general terms, how the standard operating procedure is with these specific institutions of security nature. But you say that if the officers in any circumstance act in their personal capacity, they can be sued. Otherwise,
yeah, they can be held liable.
Otherwise, the state must be the one being sued.
Exactly. If they act in their personal capacity,
okay,
they can be held liable for whatever damages he's seeking to claim. But if they act in the name of the state, it means the authority to act is also derived from law, which gives them the power to address some of these issues, especially when there are crime investigations involved and evidence collection become one of them, or prosecution become an option on the table. You can be arrested, you can be searched, your premises and your properties can be searched with or without warrant. But whichever option they choose, you will be explained to. For instance, you might be traveling across the globe, and then at customs across you check in your bags, and American Embassy Customs can decide to open your bag in your absence. And what they do is that once it is done, they fill in the form and leave in your bag and say they were the ones who opened your bag in your absence, because remember, you might have checked in the bag and you will not be there whilst your bag is open. But once it's part of what they do as a random check or as part of their investigative procedure, things could be done in your absence, but it's a standard procedure that you can be arrested without warrant, and your premises can also be searched with or without warrant, particularly when there are crime investigations involved and they are operating under the state of emergency.
Well, but is that standard operating procedure that you talk about? And I want to understand under what circumstance can a residence or someone's house be searched without a warrant? Because you say that it is part of the SOP that this action or exercise can be undertaken with or without a warrant, correct?
Correct.
So under what
Richard
circumstances is it
Kumado
done
has
without
come-
a warrant?
Yeah, so if Richard Kumado has come under investigative interest, or Richard Kumado has come under national security interest, and I have become a person of national security interest, or I have become a person of crime investigation interest, the BNI or the police can walk into my premises in my absence. Predominantly, they will want to come and show me the warrant and say, we are from so and so, introduce themselves as a standard procedure and say, we are here to search your premises or we are here to arrest you based on A, B, C, D. Or they may decide to do it in my absence. And once they have done it in my absence, what is required is to indicate why they came there and what they have done and the purposes for doing it. By the democracy where rule of law is applied, or the application of rule of law is one of the cardinal pillars that sustains a democracy, and people's rights are supposed to be respected. The BNI in particular will always explain their actions. And I'm saying that my premises can be searched without warrant. And when I come under security intelligence interest, and they needed some documentation that are of interest to them in carried out their investigations, and I have locked up my place and I have traveled to America or Britain or Canada, they can break into my place and search the place. And whatever documents they take, they will indicate that on this day, we search your premises and these are the documents we are taking. And you might want to follow up with your lawyers to come and explain A, B, C, D. So it's part of the standard procedure. But then these are legalities and these are operational structures. And
Right.
where you think your right has been infringed, that is why you want to test it at the court of law.
Mr. Kumado, appreciate your time on this, and I thank you. Thank you so much for joining us as always. Richard Kumado is a former operative of the BNI, now National Intelligence Bureau, and I need to apologize to our viewers on Facebook and on YouTube. We got the notice that we were not on when we obviously some legal questions that should and would be asked going forward, regardless of the SOP that we talk about, as explained by Mr. Kumado, is it not?
Precisely so. So, moving forward, the former finance minister, through his lawyers, will be seeking to get the reliefs that have been endorsed on the writ of summons. And in doing so, a lot of questions will come up, just like Kumado raised the issues of whether the said police officers were acting on their own or they were acting under the instruction of the national security, whichever way it is. And if that comes to question, then it brings us back to the issue of who really these people are and why the national security itself has not even been named in this particular suit. We do know, for instance, that when this incident happened, the majority leader, finance minister, and to have indicated that he got information that the exercise was carried on by the national security.
Right.
But as it stands now, this is a different matter altogether. Two police officers have been directly sued in this particular matter.
And their names so called
as to whether they will seek the cover of the national security in this particular one. The coming days will tell how the whole suit unfolds, Alfred.
Certainly. And Dennis, thank you so much for joining us always with this legal aspect of things. But coming up next here on Ghana Tonight, because this is that it's going to travel the long haul, so it's just a beginning of a conversation on this. But coming up next here on Ghana Tonight, they decided Kwatia constituency Ernest Kumi enlisted the court to quash, explain that not all ministries would have deputies. So we're yet to know those specific ministries, but we'll wait for the full complement of the deputy ministers. Then we can now know the ministries that will go without deputies in this administration. But we have the total substantive ministers, that's 43. So far, 13 ministers and deputy ministers have so far been named, and then also the 56 in total for remaining. Before end of week, we'll get to know. But beyond these numbers, the likes of Bright Simmons, Vice President of Imani Africa, says cutting down the numbers of ministries and ministers is thus an exercise, as he put it, in reading the sentiments of the public and in being responsive, which is good, and not so much about lean and efficient government reforms per se, in his view. But being a listening government can have its own rewards, separate from efficiency gains. So the emphasis that he puts there is on the efficiency gains that drives this conversation beyond the numbers as we have it right now. And he goes on to say, to actually move in the direction of government efficiency, you must act whether the thousands of workers in collapsed ministries would leave the government payroll or would simply be redistributed. That's another conversation as well. Felix Kwachofosu is Minister in charge of Government Communications, spokesperson for President John Dramani Mahama, is going to be joining us on the phone in a bit. But we also have Alfred Appiah, who's a data scientist, looking beyond just the numbers. What we also see here, the talk about efficiency and whether these persons who are going to be affected by these reduced ministries will just be redistributed. How does that reduce the cost? Alfred, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Hello, Alfred.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Now, so this conversation beyond just the numbers, and Bright Simmons also brings in the bit about, yes, this is a reflection of a listening government. It has its own rewards, but he is lifting the conversation into the area of efficiency gains as well.
Yeah, no, I think there's, Bright makes some great points there. And there are a number of ways to look at this, right? Even within the government machinery itself, right? How much is being cut relative to, say, 2024 levels, right? So if we look at the actuals from 2024 and then compared to the budget, that's one way of looking at it. The other way also is, usually when the government does the budget, what it does is it also projects out, right, over a number of years, 3 to 4 years. So one of the ways that you can also compare is to compare what budget 2024 was saying the trajectory of government expenditure was going to be, and then comparing that to the to what 2025 is budget 2025 is projected. So those are some of the ways. But beyond that, of course, outside of the government machinery itself, there are other areas to look at, right? And one of the key areas is the state-owned enterprises. So, for example, when you look at 2024 levels, we still haven't seen the full 2025 budget statement. So I'm only still using the 2024. But when you look at the total appropriation, right, the central government's total budgeted expenditure, it was about 260 billion. Right. But when you look at the budget of state-owned enterprises, it is almost double that. It is actually over double that amount. Right. So and we know that the state-owned enterprises themselves, they generate their own internal revenue and all of that. But we have to look at efficiency there too, because if the size, the budget size is double that of the central government, then there should be some opportunities for cuts there as well. And so that is one of the ways that I think we need to be focusing on as well in terms of what's happening in the SOEs. And how come they have all this spending that's happening? Because some of the SOEs also even get their funding from the central government through some of the transfers. For example, GNPC through like the petroleum revenue transfers and all of that. So that's one of them. And then the other thing that is also draining our budgets, right? And it's when you look at what is happening with ECG. So yesterday the minister gave us actually final numbers for 2024, and this is the budgeted number. We're estimating to spend 17.5 billion just for energy sector shortfalls. As it turns out, we actually ended up spending 20 million. The minister said 20.8 billion cedis was spent on energy sector shortfall. So this is money that would go towards others. For example, the budget of about 20 ministries as of at 2024 levels was about 15.8 billion. And here's a case we've spent about 20.8 billion just on energy sector shortfall. So that's also an efficiency thing. And we know what has happened with ECG in terms of under declaration of revenues and all of that. So I think that's also one of the things that we should be looking at. So that in terms of the SOE's management. And then the other part is also about debt management itself. So for, again, using 2024 levels, we're estimating about 56 billion cedis spending on interest payments alone. And then when you look at the budget of all those 28 ministries, excluding the ones that no longer exist, actually all the 28 ministries, including those that were there that no longer exist, we are looking at about 87 billion budget. So you can see that there are these different ways that I think we should also be focusing on, debt management, the SOEs, and then the efficiencies there. We haven't even talked about the capital and the contracting and everything that happens in those SOEs, because that's also the avenues where we know that sometimes there's like more practices when it comes to procurement and all of that. So I think those are some of the areas that the focus should be, of course.
I see, but then again, we see that a lot of the emphasis is on the number of ministers, and that's the various ministries as reduced as well. We did have some explanation earlier from Felix Kwachofor so that some of the collapsed ministries would have some of them would have their staff distributed amongst some of the other agencies as well. How is that going to impact on that commitment and the objective of cutting down expenditure and cost as well, alongside the reduction in the numbers?
Yeah, so I mean, we've heard about the fact that there wouldn't be ministers, and so like whatever emolument and compensation that is associated with those ministerial positions will no longer be there. So that's one of the savings that they are mentioning, which is why I'm saying that that's good, but we need to compare. Like, we need to look at 2025 compensations and then compare it to 2024, because if we're going to be redistributing, how much actually are we saving, right? How much are we actually saving? So until we get those numbers to actually be able to figure out, like, this is how much we've cut down, because it's great, we've cut down the numbers in terms of like counts, right? But the city amount associated with those positions, we need to really see how much we're actually saving in the end. And one of the things that I would also say is that in terms of trying to see how lean or how
okay, abusia we ne ensema ekoso ewo political highway so Ken Ofori Atta NHS wa file lawsuit against National Securities Operatives enye asem keto akra e beda mase se moje pene kokoti sa audio no e de MI aha POG Media so beda mase.